everyone, it's Misty, and we are headed into retreat season here at Missouri Star. We have our Dome Girls retreats that are so much fun, and every time I go to retreat, I'm looking for the perfect tote bag to bring all of my projects, and I haven't been able to find one, so I designed my own, and I can't wait to show you how to make it. So like I said, I decided to design my own bag for retreats, and let me just tell you kind of what I was thinking. I wanted it to be big enough to hold my little travel size cutting mat, to be able to fit my project bags for the designs I was working on, and then also things like my rotary cutter, scissors, my favorite ruler, clips, you know, just the usual. There's also a big zipper pocket inside, so there really is a place for everything, and it's really, really simple to make. So let me show you how we're going to do this. So to make this bag, you're going to need some of the beautiful prints from our Missouri Star signature collection. It is so fun, and these are the three that I chose. This is my exterior fabric. You'll need 1 1/4 yards of it. I went with this one. For the lining, you'll need 3/4 of a yard, and this is what I chose for the accent fabric, which is your pockets as well as your binding. You will need 1 1/2 yards. So in addition to that, you'll also need a package of your Interform double-sided Bosal foam. So that will give this bag some stability. I also use this Shape Flex iron-on woven cotton interfacing for the pockets, just to add, again, some more stability to it. We want this to hold up. You'll need these 3/4 inch snaps from Sally Tomato and a 24-inch fancy zip to go along with it. So let's dive into making this. All right, to begin, we're going to make one of our exterior panels. This is actually the back panel of the bag. And so this is our exterior fabric, and I cut it 14 by 20. And I cut a piece of my lining fabric the same size. And then I went ahead and cut out my Bosal foam a 1/2 inch smaller. So it's 13.5 by 19.5. And you can see I have that 1/4 inch of overhang all the way around. And so now, before we fuse this exterior fabric to it, we need to install our snap. So let me show you how we're going to do that. I have the snap here, and if you're not familiar, it looks like this. There's a little washer, and then the snap unit itself. Of course, this is just one of the sides. And we are going to use our ruler and measure down 3 inches from the center and make a mark. So let me grab my ruler here. Okay, and so I know that this is 20 inches wide, so I'm going to measure over 10 inches to begin with. And then I can make a mark. This is going to be close to where I need it, but at least I'll have an eye for where the center is. And then we're actually going to measure down 3 inches from the top of my fabric. So 1, 2, 3. So that mark right there, I'll put an X on it, is where I want to install my snap. So in order to do that, I can now set my washer on top of that little X, and the circle in the middle will of course go right over that. And then I'm going to draw a line on both of those long sides. See, it leaves it looking just like that. So now we can take, I like to use my seam ripper for this. And we are just going to poke all the way through. Now remember, I've already fused the lining fabric on the other side. So we're going to poke through all of those layers and just barely slide the seam ripper so it creates this little cut through the fabric. And this seems to work the best for me. It's very forgiving. And so now that I've done that, I can take my snap and I can poke it through from this side, just like so, and then place the washer over the top of that and fold these back to hold that in place, just like so. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and put our exterior fabric over it. I'm going to hit this with the iron, and then we are going to quilt this, and we're just going to be really careful to go on either side of the snap, and you can totally feel it through your fabric. So you just want to be mindful of it when we get to quilting. So let's go ahead and fuse it over here at the ironing board. Move this out of the way for a second. Make sure it's all lined up. Just hit this with a nice hot iron. Just like so. All right. Now we are ready to quilt it. Let me show you what I'm planning to do. I am going to quilt this 1.5 inches apart at a 45 angle. So it's going to look just like this when I'm all done. So I'm going to go ahead and quilt this, and I'll meet you back here when I have it ready to go. All right, so I have quilted this entire thing. As you can see, I just avoided my snap and went on either side of it with my quilting. And so this is my back panel. Remember, it is 14 by 20, and the front panel is exactly the same size, just no snap on this one. And so I have that one ready to go. Then you're also going to have 2 side pieces that are 4.5 by 14. Remember, we cut the bosal a 1/2 inch smaller than that on the inside. And then the bottom section of your bag is 4.5 by 20. So I have all of those ready to rock. And now we can move on to making our pockets. So I'm going to set these aside for now. And let's make the outside pocket. So I have that here. So I cut actually 3 pieces from this accent fabric that you see here that measure 13 by 20. And 2 of those you're going to use for the inside pocket, and 1 of them we're going to use for the outside. I have backed this with that Shape Flex stabilizer all the way across. And now we are just going to press this in half. So I'm going to take this over to the ironing board and make sure I have it all ready to go. If I can slide over there. My chair didn't want to move. There we go. Just have this folded exactly in half. And we will press this all the way across. Just like so. And now the first step I'm going to take is actually do a line of top stitching across this folded edge. So I'm just going to do a nice narrow stitch. I like to lengthen my stitch length just a little bit when I'm top stitching. Just think it looks nice. There we go. All right, so now we're going to take this and we're going to grab that front panel that we made. So remember, that's the one without the snap. You want to double check and make sure of that. And then I am going to set this along one of the long edges of that panel. So here you can put a pin in it if you would like, or you could use clips. But I am just going to hold this in place. And then I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to measure over 5 inches. And every 5 inches, I'm going to make a little mark. I'm going to use a micron pen so that you guys can see. Typically, I would use a chalk pen or something that wouldn't show up. So just keep that in mind because you will probably see this. I'm just going to make a tiny little dot every 5 inches. And that is going to create 4 pockets because I'm going to sew a straight line down on each of these to create the pockets so that I can slip my rotary cutter or things like that in there. So you would just, lay your ruler along that edge. You could line it up with the top of the pocket and draw all the way down with your chalk marker, just like so. I'll go ahead and do it for you. Not a big deal. And so we'll just work our way across. Just like so. You could even use a pencil if you wanted. I just marked those really lightly, and now we're going to take this back to the machine and just stitch right on those lines that we drew. So I am going to back stitch at the beginning there because that's where we could run into, some wear and tear on the pocket. Move over to the next one. Remember to back stitch. There we go, and one final pocket. There we go. So now you can see I've made those pockets. You could absolutely go back and baste this outside edge if you want. That just means you really lengthen your stitch length. And we just tack that down. I'm just taking a super narrow seam there because I don't want that to show later on. So I've basted that edge, and I can flip this around. And that's just gonna help to make sure that that doesn't flip up and get caught where we don't want it later on. So it's always a good idea if you don't want to mess with that. There we go. So now our pocket is added to our front panel, and we can move on to making our inside pocket. So let's take a look at that. So like I said, remember you cut 2 more of those pieces that were 13 by 20. I have those here. And we have backed those with the shape flex just like before, and I'm just going to put these right sides together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along one of the long edges. So let's do that. Okay, so now we are just going to open this up, and we are going to press this so that our raw edges are inside. The way that I'm making these pockets and this bag will finish up with no raw edges inside, which is what we want for a beautiful finish. So I just always kind of roll this with my fingers, and then we'll go across and press as we go. Make sure I don't have anything tucked up there and our seams are laying nice and flat. There we go. Just like that. So now I have the first one done, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I just showed you with these smaller rectangles. They measure 10.5 by 20. Same idea though, they are backed with the shape flex, and we are going to sew them with a 1/4 inch seam on the long side. So I will do that, press them just like I did the other, and I'll meet you back here. All right, so I have done that with both of these sets of rectangles. Here's the larger ones and the smaller ones. And now what we're gonna do is we are going to add our zipper where we have that seam. And that is so we don't have any raw edges. We're not setting this zipper in because I'm using one of our 24-inch fancy zips. And I am just going to lay this along the edge here and top stitch it down. And so let's take this to the machine and we'll add one side and then the other. All right. So we will begin by making sure that this is just right along the edge of that seam because we don't want it to get caught in the way of the zipper itself. And typically I would switch out my thread here and use a matching thread so that it's not so obvious, but this way you guys will be able to see. So I'm just going to press this under here, under my presser foot, and top stitch. A lot of people like to use a zigzag here. That's totally an option if you prefer it, but you can see why you would want to match the thread. Have that side done, and so now we're going to add the other side on here. You do want to make sure that your fabric edges are lined up when you're starting. so that this will all work out the way we want it to. And now I can just stitch down this side. And kind of roll this up out of the way as I go. There we go. We have added our fancy zip. All right, let's bring this over to the cutting mat now, and I will show you how this is going to work. So of course, first things first, we want to open our zipper and make sure that the zipper head is in the middle before we proceed any further, because we do not want to cut that off or we'll have to redo everything that we just did. But once we have moved that to the middle, now we can take our ruler and our rotary cutter or scissors, and we can just cut the zipper off even with our sides, on both sides here, just like so. And now we are going to fold this in half, and it's going to create this little top piece like you see here. And that is going to be the top of our pocket. And so let's go ahead and take this to the ironing board, and we're going to press this. I'm going to put a few little pins in here to hold it in place, and then we will top stitch along the top edge and baste these sides. All right, so like I mentioned, I pressed along this top edge, and I've put a pin on either side by my zipper to hold that in place exactly where I want it. And now we're going to run a line of top stitching along the top edge of our pocket. This is going to be what forms the little slip pocket that our cutting mat can slide behind. There we go. That top edge is done. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull the pin out of this side. I'm going to lengthen that stitch length again. You always want to remember when you do this so you can turn it back, and I'm going to baste these sides. Again, we're just doing this because we don't want any of these layers to flip up and cause problems later. There we go. And this side. All right, and then we're going to make sure I turn that stitch length back down so it's ready to go for next time. We have this inside pocket ready to go, and the only thing we have left to do is to add that snap that's going to go on the back. Remember, we have already installed our snap on the back panel. So let me find that for you here. And so now this is going to lay just like so, and we need to figure out exactly where our snap goes. And so what I like to do is just kind of feel with my finger, and I can fold this back and see where the center of that snap is. Hopefully you guys can see that right there. And on this back fabric, I'm going to make a tiny little dot right there. And now I can flip this over. So remember, because I can still access this through the bottom, we can add the snap afterwards. And so that's what we're doing right now. So now from that center dot, I'm going to lay my washer just as we did before and use my micron pin. Oops, the magnet attached to the lid, that's funny. And we are going to draw those little lines on either side, just like we did before. And grab our seam ripper, which I have over here. And we just want to make sure we're only going through this outside layer. because of course that inside layer of fabric is our pocket. So just very carefully slide your seam ripper in and along those marks gently. There we go. There we go. All right. So once we have those slits made, we can take the other side of our snap, and the little prongs are just going to go right in those slits, and we can turn this whole thing inside out. So you can double check and make sure and see that it's gone through. And it looks great. And so then we take our little washer, just like before. We're going to slide that over there and fold these back. And it does help if you kind of have this against the table when you are pushing those prongs back. It's just nice to have something to push against. And now our snap is in. You can see how that's going to line up beautifully with our pocket. And now we can baste these sides to this panel, and then we can put our whole bag together. Okay, so I have basted this pocket down, and now we can assemble our bag all together. So we have our side and our bottom panels that we quilted earlier, and then our front section and our back section. So let's go ahead and put this together. So to start with, we are going to take one of our side sections, and we are going to sew it like so along this edge. And we are keeping our raw edges out because I'm going to finish this off with a binding all the way around the outside edge. So let's take this to the machine and begin by sewing these two together. With our 1/4 inch seam. Just make sure everything stays lined up. And if you have a problem with this bulk on your machine, you can switch this out for a walking foot. But because we cut our bozal smaller, you should be mostly just catching fabric. If you have a problem, you can also cut your bozal even, smaller than a 1/2 inch less than the outside panels, because you really don't want to have all that bulk in those seams. So there is our first one. You can see how that looks on the inside. It's going to be nice and clean. Then we'll take our other panel. Remember, the pocket goes on the inside on this one. And we can sew these together. Make sure my pockets are all opening the same way. Ask me how I know. Make sure you get that right. Then we'll lay this on here. Sew this side together. There we go. And now we will add the other side. Just like before. Just take your time here. Okay, and then we will attach this so we have a big loop. Just making sure everything is staying lined up along that edge. There we go. All right. Starting to take shape. So now we're going to set in the bottom. So this is really the same idea, and honestly, one little tip that you can do to make it just a smidge easier, cut out these outside corners just like so. That will get rid of some of the bulk in those corners when you go to sew them, and it will make it much easier for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on all of my sides. Just a little 1/4 inch box that we're getting rid of. And one more. There we go. Okay. And now we will match this up. I like to start along one of the long sides. And then sew down. And then when I cut out that little box, I'm not sure if you guys can see here or not, you'll notice where I cut out that box, it's going to line up right with my seam edge there. And this little bit over here is what I'm actually going to attach to this shorter side piece when it comes to that time. So I'll actually start stitching right at that part that I cut out. Back stitch a little bit. And then just make sure that this is staying all lined up. It's easy for things to shift, so if you want to pin or use your clips for this, this is a great opportunity to do that. Like I said, a walking foot, because of the bulk, could be helpful, whatever you find you need. Make sure my pocket stays where I want along the bottom here. This is the side that has the most layers, so just want to take your time. And then we are almost to that other side. And again, we're going to stop where that little tab that I cut out ends. Backstitch. There we go. And now I'm going to do the opposite side, and then I'll come back and do the short ends. All right, so all that I have left is one of these short sides, and I want to show you how it really gets easier the farther along you go because we notched out those little corners. And so now I can just pinch this last side nice and straight. We'll put this under the machine, and we want to start right where that little notch is, and sew straight across. And you just really want to take your time for this part. So straight across and back stitch at the start and the stop. And it is taking shape. Look at that. It's starting to look like a bag now, isn't it? I love it. Okay, so now as far as finishing this off goes, let me talk to you about the binding. I have this one all bound, and then I'll talk to you about the handles at the end. And so for the binding, I did straight sides on all four corners and bound those edges first. And I did sew them on by machine on the front, and I pulled them around back and finished them by hand, but you could totally machine bind the whole thing. And then once I did all four of these sides, I did the top edge and then the bottom edge all the way around in one continuous loop. And so hopefully that makes good sense to you. And so then I added these nice long straps because I wanted to be able to, throw this over my shoulder, and I'm really tall. And so for that, you are going to need a 7-inch by 40-inch rectangle of your fabric, just like so. And then I did go ahead and add some of that shape flex just to give it some extra strength. And then we're going to take this over to the iron. And we are going to press this in half longwise, all the way down. Here we go. And then once I have all of this pressed in half, I'll open this up again, and I'll fold each side into the center. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, so I have this all turned under. I've got this nice wide strap like I wanted. And so now I'm just gonna top stitch along this open end and then on the other side as well to match. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now we have our strap all done, and remember you'll need 2 of these, so you'll just repeat that again for the other side. And let's talk about how I attached it to the bag. You can see here, I folded this under about 1.5 inches, and then I boxed all the way around and then added some stitching in an X across just to really anchor that in place. And I measured 5 inches from the outside edge to place those straps on both sides. And so you can see 5 inches in, and then a nice box with an X front and back. And then that is it. It is so simple. You've got this great bag to hold all your projects, your cutting mat, store things in the zipper in there, and these outside pockets for you to use as well and take on your next retreat. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and I'll see you next time on At Home with Misty. Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching At Home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.